The desert night was an endless canvas of stars, cold and distant, stretching over the red sands like an unyielding watchman. Around the flickering campfire, I sat with Yari Mikari, the desert's own son, his face carved by years of sun and wind, his eyes steady as ever, despite the uncertainty that gripped us both. The firelight danced across his features, casting shadows that seemed to echo the turmoil in my own thoughts. "They're watching us," Yari murmured, his voice low and steady, betraying none of the worry I felt clawing at my chest. "Seleni's camp, not far beyond the ridge. Their scouts move like ghosts in the dark." I nodded, fingers tracing the worn edge of the cryptic map I'd received days before, the one that promised the Chronos Artifact, the key to rewriting my past and maybe, just maybe, my future. Yet, with every step deeper into the desert's embrace, the lines between friend and foe blurred, shifting like the dunes themselves. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not with Selene Voss breathing down my neck, her calculating eyes always searching, always plotting. She was a woman carved from the desert's harshest stones, elegant yet merciless, a silver scar trailing down her jawline like a wound that refused to heal. Her obsession with the artifact was a fire that threatened to consume everything, including her own sister, Lena. Lena was different. I had glimpsed it in the way she hesitated, the subtle flicker of doubt in her eyes whenever Selene's words turned cold and unyielding. Soft features framed by dust-streaked goggles, a reluctant shadow in Selene's relentless storm. Tonight, that shadow reached out. A soft rustle broke the silence. From the edge of the camp, Lena approached, cautious and light-footed, as if the desert itself might betray her presence. Her gaze met mine, eyes wide and searching, a silent question hanging between us. I gestured her closer, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Why come to me?" I whispered, voice rough from desert dust and sleepless nights. She hesitated, then spoke in a breath. "Because I don't believe in what she's doing. This hunt, it's not just for power. It's for destruction." In that moment, the desert's chill seemed to deepen, the fire shrinking as the weight of her words settled between us. Trust was a fragile thread, fraying at the edges, yet here it was, offered, trembling but real. Back in Selene's camp, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Harsh whispers and clipped orders filled the air as Selene's piercing gaze locked onto Lena, suspicion darkening her features. "You're wavering," Selene accused, voice cold as the night. "There's no room for doubt here." Lena's reply was a whisper, barely audible, but laden with defiance. "Maybe there's no room for anything but ruin if we don't change course." The fracture within their ranks was widening, and I knew that the fragile peace between our expeditions was crumbling with it. The desert was no longer just a backdrop for our hunt. It was a crucible, forging new alliances and shattering old ones. As the night deepened, Lena and I exchanged more than just words. We shared glances heavy with unspoken promises and cautious hope. Her knowledge of Selene's plans, her doubts about the ruthless pursuit of the Chronos Artifact, became weapons as sharp as any blade. But with every secret shared, every alliance formed in shadows, the risk of betrayal grew. Could I trust her? Could she trust me? The desert had taught me that survival depended on reading the shifting sands and the shifting hearts with equal skill. The wind picked up, carrying with it the distant howl of a sandstorm gathering strength. Our time was running out. Trust, once broken, was hard to mend. Yet, amid the swirling sands and fractured loyalties, a fragile hope flickered. This was more than a battle for an artifact. It was a battle for trust, for redemption, for the chance to rewrite not just history, but our own fates. And as I stared into the dancing flames, the desert whispered its eternal warning. In the red sands, betrayal was the only true constant. I settled deeper into my cloak, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the firelight. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, beneath the endless stars, a new alliance was born. Fragile, uncertain, but perhaps the only chance we had to survive. The desert held its breath, and so did I. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows that stretched over the endless dunes like ancient fingers reaching out from the red sands. Yari Mekari squinted against the biting wind, his dark skin etched with the familiar desert markings that seemed to dance in the fading light. Beside him, I adjusted the straps of my gear, the worn leather creaking softly, and studied the towering stone facade that loomed ahead. The entrance to the temple complex whispered about in hushed legends and cryptic maps. The temple's massive doors were carved with intricate symbols, their meaning lost to time, but their craftsmanship undeniable. Dust swirled violently around our boots, the desert wind howling like a living beast caught in an eternal rage. I felt the weight of the moment press down on me. This was it, the gateway to the Chronos Artifact, the prize that had driven me through the unforgiving sands and rival gun barrels alike. "This is it," Yari muttered, his voice low but steady. "The place where time itself sleeps." A shiver ran down my spine, the whether from the cold or the anticipation, I couldn't say. We pressed forward, our footsteps echoing off the ancient stone as we crossed the threshold. The air inside was stale, thick with dust that danced in the beams of our headlamps like ghosts of the past. The corridors stretched before us in a labyrinthine maze, walls adorned with faded murals depicting scenes of gods and mortals intertwined in battles lost to memory. I paused, fingertips tracing the edge of an inscription. The language was unfamiliar, but the patterns suggested a warning. Somewhere in these halls lay traps, ingenious and deadly, designed to protect the secrets within. I motioned to Yari, who nodded, his eyes sharp and alert. "Stay close," I whispered. "One wrong step in this place will bury us for good." The first trap revealed itself almost immediately. A pressure plate hidden beneath the sand triggered a series of grinding gears and a hailstorm of darts shot from concealed slits in the walls. I dove to the side, the darts thudding into stone mere inches from my head. Yari responded with a quick roll, narrowly avoiding the deadly barrage. "This place doesn't want visitors," he muttered, eyes scanning for more hidden dangers. We moved cautiously, every moment a test of nerve and skill. I found myself relying on instincts honed during years of combat and survival, my hands steady despite the pounding of my heart. Ancient mechanisms creaked and groaned as we disarmed traps and deciphered cryptic puzzles etched into the walls. The deeper we ventured, the heavier the air grew, as though the temple itself was watching, waiting. Then her voice cut through the stale silence, cold, clear, and laced with steel. "You're trespassing, Draven." I spun toward the source, heart tightening. Celine Voss emerged from the shadows, her elegant but unyielding posture framed by the flickering light. The silver scar along her jawline caught the glow, a stark reminder of the losses that had shaped her ruthless pursuit. "Voss," I said, voice low but edged with warning. "I should have known you'd be here." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The artifact belongs to those who have the will to claim it, not a rogue mercenary running from ghosts." Lena appeared behind her, dust-streaked goggles reflecting the dim light, eyes softer but clouded with conflict. The tension between the sisters was palpable, a silent battle of loyalties playing out in glances and unspoken words. "Enough," I said, stepping forward. "We don't have time for your games. The desert is closing in." Outside, the wind had risen to a furious howl. The sandstorm, a monstrous wall of dust and fury, advanced relentlessly, blotting out the sun and threatening to seal the temple's entrance forever. The desert was claiming back its secrets, and anyone foolish enough to seek them. The temple trembled with the shifting sands, ancient stone groaning as if resisting the inevitable. I glanced at Celine, her expression hardening. "Truce, for now," I offered. "We survived the storm together and settled the score." She considered, then nodded sharply. "Agreed. But know this, Draven. When the sands settle, no alliance will hold." The corridors around us seemed to close in, the temple's labyrinth becoming a cage. We pressed onward, the faint glow of torches from Celene's faction flickering ahead. Every step was a battle against the past and the present, the relentless desert and the deadly secrets buried in the heart of the red sands. I tightened my grip on my rifle, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. Time was no longer a constant here. It was a weapon, a curse, and a prize all at once. And I was determined not to be the one swallowed by the shifting tides of fate. Ahead, the temple's inner sanctum awaited. Whatever lay beyond that threshold could change everything or end it all. But for now, we survived. The first crack of the sky's fury came as a distant roar, a low rumble that quickly escalated into a deafening howl. I glanced up from the ancient map I'd been tracing, the brittle parchment trembling in my hands as the wind tore through the desert. The red sands had been churning for hours, the horizon blurred by endless waves of dust and sand. But this storm was different. It was coming fast, and it carried a ferocity that promised no mercy. "We have to move." Jerry's voice was sharp, slicing through the mounting chaos. His eyes, dark and unyielding, scanned the swirling wasteland as if reading a language only he could understand. Celene's expedition was close behind us, their figures ghostly shadows against the storm's approach, and any delay now meant death or worse. The temple entrance yawned ahead, a gaping maw carved into the rock and sand, its dark interior offering a fragile refuge from the storm's wrath. Behind us, the desert screamed, a wall of sand and fury that swallowed tracks and voices alike. With no time to hesitate, we plunged into the shadowed corridors, the temperature dropping instantly as the oppressive heat of the sun gave way to the cold stone. Inside, the air was thick with dust, stirred up from the desert's breath, catching in my throat and clinging to my skin. Torches sputtered along the walls, their flickering flames casting grotesque shadows on the hieroglyphs that told stories of gods and kings long dead. The silence was broken only by the whispered footsteps and ragged breaths of those gathered within these ancient halls. Celene's team was already there, tension crackling in the stale air like static electricity. Her piercing eyes met mine across the room, cold and unyielding beneath the silver scar that traced her jaw. She nodded curtly, a gesture that barely concealed the animosity simmering beneath the surface. "This storm will bury us if we don't work together," she said, voice low but commanding. For now, I kept my reply brief, every muscle taut with distrust. Temporary truce. But the temple's claustrophobic corridors bred suspicion as much as shelter. Whispered accusations ricocheted off stone walls, and every glance was weighed for hidden threats. Lena, Celene's sister, hovered at the edges, her soft features shadowed beneath dust-streaked goggles. From the way she avoided Celene's harsh gaze, I could see the conflict tearing her apart. Later, when the storm's roar dimmed to a distant growl, Lena slipped me a folded note. Her hand trembled slightly, eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and hope. "We don't have to be enemies," the note read, "but trust is a risk." The hours dragged on, the storm outside relentless, the desert's fury a constant reminder of how precarious our position was. Secrets spilled in hushed voices. Alliances fractured under the weight of desperation. Even Yari, ever the steady guide, cast wary glances at Rashid al-Nasir, the traitor whose loyalties never seemed to rest on solid ground. I found myself pacing the narrow passages, the weight of the worn locket hidden beneath my gear, a steady pulse against my chest. Memories surfaced, unbidden betrayals, losses, the faces of men I'd left behind. The Chronos Artifact was no longer just a prize. It was a chance at redemption, at rewriting the past I couldn't escape. But here, in the belly of the temple, with the storm howling like a beast outside and enemies close enough to hear my breath, every step was a gamble. Friend and foe blurred in the dust and shadow, and one wrong move could mean death. I met Selene again in the central chamber, our eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. The air between us was thick with history and hatred, but beneath it, an unspoken understanding flickered. The desert tested us all, and only the cunning would survive. As the storm began to wane, the temple seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the sand settled, but inside, the real storm was just beginning. The whispers in the storm promised nothing but chaos, and I was ready to face it head-on. The temple's interior was cloaked in shadows, lit only by the pale shafts of sunlight filtering through cracks in the ancient stone. Dust motes drifted lazily in the stale air, disturbed only by my slow, deliberate movements. I stood alone in the heart of that forsaken place, the weight of the desert pressing in from all sides. My fingers traced the worn silver locket hanging at my chest, its cold surface a stark contrast to the dry heat of the temple walls. The locket was more than a keepsake. It was a tether to a past I'd tried hard to forget. Its surface was scratched and dulled, the delicate engravings worn smooth by years of handling. I closed my eyes briefly, memories flooding and unbidden. Faces, voices, betrayals, ghosts that still haunted the edges of my mind. But here, in the silence of the temple, those ghosts felt nearer, almost tangible. A sudden noise snapped me back to the present, a soft shuffle of footsteps echoing down the corridor. I slipped the locket beneath my shirt and melted into the shadows, every muscle taut, every sense alert. The desert was relentless, but it was the people, the rivals, the traitors that posed the greatest danger now. Among them, Selene Voss was a storm all her own, relentless and cunning, her gaze as sharp and unforgiving as the desert sun. Yet it was her sister, Lena, who now occupied my thoughts. Our brief encounters had been charged with unspoken tensions, her conflicted glances and subtle gestures hinting at doubts she dared not voice openly. When she slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand during a fleeting moment apart from Selene's watchful eye, the world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. The note was small, the edges worn, but the words inside burned with quiet urgency. Lena's script was neat but hurried, a testament to the risks she was willing to take. She spoke of doubts, of fractures in Selene's resolve, and the possibility of a different path. The implications were clear. Alliances could shift, and some loyalties were not as ironclad as they appeared. I folded the note carefully, the scent of jasmine faint but unmistakable, a strange comfort amid the dust and decay. It reminded me of distant memories, long buried beneath layers of pain and regret. For a moment, the mercenary within me faltered, replaced by a man grappling with hope and fear in equal measure. But hope was a dangerous thing in the red sands, trust even more so. I tucked the note away, my mind racing with possibilities and dangers. If Lena was willing to risk Selene's wrath, perhaps there was a chance to turn the tide. Or perhaps it was a trap, another layer of deception in a game where betrayal was the only sure currency. The temple seemed to close in around me, the shadows deepening as the silence stretched. Somewhere beyond the crumbling walls, the desert raged on unforgiving, untamed. Yet in that moment, I felt a flicker of something else, a fragile thread of connection, a glimmer of alliance in the midst of chaos. I glanced down at the locket once more, the symbol of my past and the key to my future. The desert had shaped me, hardened me, but it had not yet broken me. As I prepared to move deeper into the temple's depths, I knew the path ahead would test every ounce of my cunning and resolve. And with Lena's secret message folded tight in my pocket, the stakes had never been higher. A sudden gust of wind swept through the temple entrance, carrying with it the distant roar of shifting sands. The storm was coming. Time was running out. I tightened my grip on the locket, squared my shoulders, and stepped forward into the darkness. The game was far from over, and in the heart of the red sands, every secret could mean the difference between life and death. The locket's secret was mine to bear, and perhaps my greatest weapon yet. But as the shadows lengthened and the sands whispered their ancient warnings, one question lingered in the quiet. Could I trust the fragile hope that now flickered between me and Lena? Or was it yet another mirage in a desert of lies? The desert held its breath. So did I. The desert night settled around us like a vast, suffocating shroud, the cold biting through the thin layers of my worn desert gear. The campfire burned low, its embers whispering faintly as the wind played with the heat. I sat apart from the others, the flickering glow casting grotesque shadows on my sun-weathered face. The silence was not empty. It was filled with ghosts. Memories clawed their way from the depths of my mind, unbidden and relentless. Gunfire echoed across the barren wasteland of my past, sharp and sudden. The acrid scent of smoke and the metallic tongue of blood filled the air, dragging me back to that fateful mission. I saw their faces friends, brothers in arms falling one by one under the hail of enemy fire. But it wasn't just the enemy that betrayed us. The sting of treachery had come from within, a knife twisted in the back, leaving my unit shattered and me running, hunted not just by foes, but by my own memories. Each flashback was a jagged shard of pain, the shouted orders drowned by chaos, the betrayal whispered in the dark, the cold realization that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. I clenched my fists, the leather straps of my gloves creaking softly, a physical anchor against the storm inside. It was that night that forged the man I had become, a mercenary, shaped by loss and driven by a desperate hope to rewrite my fate. Across the camp, Selene Voss was a study in contrasts. By the dim lantern light, her silhouette was elegant but unyielding. Her sharp eyes scanned ancient texts with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The silver scar tracing her jawline caught the light, a stark reminder of battles fought, both external and internal. I had caught glimpses of her vulnerability before, fleeting moments when the cold facade cracked to reveal pain rooted in a family lost to war. It was this loss that fueled her relentless pursuit of the Chronos Artifact, a device she believed could mend history's wounds. Yari Mekari, ever the steadfast guide, approached quietly, his dark eyes reflecting concern beneath the harsh desert sky. "Kael," he said softly, his voice steady, but not without urgency. "These ghosts of yours, they're chains. We need you here now. The desert doesn't forgive hesitation." I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of regret. Jari's loyalty was a rare constant in the shifting sands of alliances and deception. His pragmatic wisdom was a beacon, though even he could not fully grasp the depth of the storm that churned beneath my calm exterior. Meanwhile, Lena Voss lingered at the camp's edge, shadows cloaking her movements. Her gaze followed me with a conflicted intensity, torn between allegiance to her sister and a growing sympathy for my cause. The dust-streaked goggles she wore obscured her soft features, but her turmoil was unmistakable. I sensed in her a potential ally, or perhaps a dangerous wild card in the escalating conflict. As the night deepened, I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to steel my resolve. The past was a weight, but the future was a battlefield waiting to be claimed. The Chronos Artifact was more than a prize. It was the key to salvation or destruction. My haunted memories were no longer just chains. They were the fuel for a fire that would not be easily extinguished. The desert wind whispered warnings through the tents, carrying the scent of shifting sands and impending storms. Somewhere out there, Selene's obsession was reaching a fever pitch, threatening to consume us all. But I would not falter. Not now. Not ever. The night closed in. but my heart beat with fierce determination. The shadows of the past would not define me. They would drive me forward into the unforgiving dawn of the red sands. And as the first light crept over the horizon, I knew the true battle was only beginning. The sun beat down mercilessly on the red sands, the heat radiating off the dunes in waves that blurred the horizon. Kael Draven crouched beside the scattered remnants of their camp, his eyes scanning the area with a sharp intensity. The small leather pouch that had once held the vital fragment of the map was gone, vanished, as if swallowed by the desert itself. His heart pounded, not from the relentless sun, but from the cold realization that someone within their group had betrayed them. Yari Mekari approached cautiously, his dark eyes narrowing as he noticed Kael's grim expression. "It's missing," Kael said quietly, holding out the empty hands. "The fragment. Someone took it." Yari's face tightened, the usual calm pragmatism giving way to a flicker of unease. "That changes everything." Kael nodded slowly, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. They had been too careful, it seemed. But in a race against time, trust was a commodity as fragile as the desert glass that shimmered beneath their boots. That night, the camp was a cauldron of tension. The desert wind whipped around their tents, carrying with it the faint whispers of shifting sands and unspoken fears. Around the fire, faces were drawn tight with suspicion. Celine Voss's cold gaze swept over the group like a blade, but even she did not escape the shadow of doubt. Who would do this? Lena Voss's voice was low, but charged with emotion. "We're all risking everything. Why betray the group now?" Kael's jaw clenched. "We don't have time for accusations without proof," he said. "But make no mistake, this changes the game." Rashid al-Nasser hovered near the edge of the firelight, his expression unreadable. Kael caught his eye for a fleeting moment. There was something in Rashid's glance calculated, cautious, that made the mercenary's gut tighten. Was this the betrayal's source, or merely circumstantial? In the desert, alliances were as shifting as the dunes themselves. Yari stepped forward, voice firm. "We need to move quickly. Whoever took the fragment is counting on us being divided. We can't let that happen." The night stretched on with whispered accusations and wary glances, the fragile trust between the explorers fracturing under the strain. Kael felt the old familiar sting of isolation creep in, but he pushed it down. Survival demanded focus, not fear. In the hours before dawn, Kael climbed to the crest of a nearby dune, the vastness of the red sands sprawling endlessly before him. The stolen fragment was more than just a piece of parchment. It was a symbol of broken trust, a crack in their fragile alliance that could cost them everything. His fingers brushed the worn locket hidden beneath his shirt, a reminder of a past he couldn't escape and a future he was desperate to forge. The desert was unforgiving, but Kael Draven was no stranger to hardship. With the sun rising behind him, he tightened his grip on the locket and scanned the horizon. The race was far from over. The sands whispered secrets, and betrayal lurked in every shadow. But Kael's resolve burned hotter than the desert sun. He would find the truth. He would claim the Chronos Artifact, and he would survive. As the first light painted the dunes gold, the mercenary's breath came steady, his heart a drumbeat of tense determination. Somewhere out there, the traitor moved, but Kael was already planning his next move. The desert was vast, the dangers many, and the stakes higher than ever. Yet beneath it all, a fierce hope flickered, hope that even in betrayal there could be redemption, and that the sands of fate might still be turned. The chapter closed with the wind, carrying the echoes of whispered lies and shattered alliances, but also with the unyielding pulse of a man who refused to be broken. Kael Draven was ready to face whatever came next, alone if he had to, against the endless red sands and the betrayal that threatened to bury them all.